Hello, fifth grade readers. By now, I hope that you are really into your fantasy novels and you have discovered why they come from such a unique genre. I want to take a moment to review what we have discussed a few weeks ago about the importance of the setting in a fantasy story. I know that sometimes the world can start off right away in a magical place, right from the beginning. And even sometimes it starts out in a normal world and then it transitions into the world that's magical. And sometimes it's in a world that we don't even recognize it, a futuristic world. One thing for sure is the setting always plays an important character in our novels, and we have to be aware of it. Today I want to focus on the characters and the plot. Readers, today I want to discuss another way for you to understand and identify clues that the author wants you to notice when you're reading your novels. One thing I know for sure is that fantasy reading can be difficult, and the author always tries to give us a little hint or clue, providing us information through the mouths of their characters. One character might describe an incident or a legend or a part of history, and the author is hoping that you pick up on this. The fact is that you are really learning alongside some of the other characters. The author is hoping that you are alert as readers and that you'll pick up when this happens. Sometimes it will help fill in the gaps for you and help you comprehend the text a little better. Often the main character has a dramatic experience, and that character comes away with new realizations because of it. We are on the same learning curve as the main character when we are reading fantasy stories. I would like you to listen to this clip from Narnia. And I want to see if you can pick up on what happens when Mr. Tubness meets Lucy for the very first time in the world of Narnia. He is hidden behind a tree, and in that moment, all of a sudden he discovers this young lady. Now remember, he's a faun and he's not a human. She reaches down and she grabs a journal, and he's a little confused about what's happening. He backs up ever so softly.
No. Well, no, I was just, I didn't want to scare you.
If you don't mind my asking, what are you?
Well, I'm a thorn. And what about you? You must be some kind of beardless dwarf?
I'm not a dwarf. I'm a girl. And actually, I'm tallest in my class.
You mean to say that you're a daughter of Eve?
My mum's name is Helen.
Yes, but you are, in fact, human.
Yes, of course.
What are you doing here?
Well, I was hiding in the wardrobe in the spare room.
Spare room? Is that in Narnia?
Narnia? What's that?
There you go, you're in it. Everything from the lamppost all the way to Castle Clare Paravel on the Eastern Ocean. Every stick and stone you see, every icicle, is Narnia.
It's an awfully big wardrobe.
I'm sorry, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Thomas.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Thomas. And Miss Pevensey.
She sticks out her hand.
Oh, you shake it.
Why?
I don't know. People do it when they meet each other.
He reaches out and he grabs and shakes her hand. In that moment, right as we're listening and right as we're reading in the story, we recognize that Mr. Tubness was actually learning from Lucy what it means to be human. As a reader, we are pulled into his thoughts and his feelings as he questions Lucy about the handshake. This happens all the time in fantasy chapter books. We are constantly learning from our characters. I want you to think about fantasy picture books, and I want you to think about how they're different than the fantasy chapter books that you're reading now. When you were little, and perhaps even now, you would enjoy picture fantasy books. Although authors describe the settings and the stories, and usually they have one or a few main characters, there's only one central problem or plot to the story. We can usually figure it out and be able to retell the story quite easily. We were able to do this in books like Where the Wild Things Are and in the Lorax. We'll be lucky enough because Mrs. Foltz will be sharing this book with us today. When we listen and read books, we have to also be aware that in chapter books it becomes quite difficult for us to remember everything that happens with the characters. There often are multiple plots and the actions of the main characters are changing all the time. And we need to keep this all straight in our minds. So today I'm going to share this with you. It's a tracking system. You might think it's pointless to keep track as you read, but I can assure you that it will help you with your comprehension. You'll be able to understand the multiple plot lines and keep it straight as your story continues to unfold. When you have a time to evaluate your characters and understand information from their point of view, you'll be able to connect even more to the world that they live in. One way to do this is through a system such as this chart that I provided for you. Or perhaps you might even like to use a notebook. When you take a moment to look at this, these are some of the things that I jotted down from the scene that was just shared with you that took place in Narnia. Having it in a Google Doc like this, you will be able to add information about your characters as they continue to evolve and perhaps change during your story. I always tell my students to refrain from making assumptions about their characters, especially at the beginning of stories, because characters are dynamic and they are bound to change, especially in fantasy stories. In this lesson, you will find a chart similar to this, and I provided it for your tracking purposes of your characters, your personality traits, the actions, and even background information. And perhaps even things that you might feel that your mind has changed about since you started the story. We truly hope that you enjoy the fantasy story that you're reading currently. We want you to remember that you are expected to read about 20 minutes per day. Our goal is to be done with your book by May 25th. In this lesson, you will find that there is a video from Mrs. Foltz. She will be reading the Lorax to you for your enjoyment. There will be a few questions on the Checking for Understanding form that you will need to listen and then record your responses in. Please fill out the Check for Understanding, submit, and press Turn In when you are done. The chart is also for you to add, to change up, and to make it your own. You won't be graded on this, but you are encouraged to use it, or perhaps a notebook to keep track of your fantasy characters and your plot changes. I sure miss all of you, and I hope that you are enjoying your story. So now, off you go and read.